Mankind has always had the hunger, the need to push, to race, to challenge not only others, but ourselves. For many of us, we crave this feeling. And sadly, for many of us, the opportunity never comes. But occasionally, the fates, whether they be cruel or kind, listen and grant a chance to a weary soul, a chance to do something one has always dreamed of. But, as the saying goes, everything has a cost, and be careful what you wish for. This is the tale of Frank Hayes, a man who dreamed on racing horses. Our story begins in 1901 in Ireland, where a baby boy would be born. The exact date is unknown. For a large portion of his childhood, he'd be raised in Ireland, until, as a young man, him and his family would immigrate to the United States in 1916. They would move to New York City. Coming from a relatively poor family that, if I had to guess, spent most of its money, if not all of its money, to get to America, finding work was a necessity. Frank would work for himself and his family as a stable hand, working for a James K.L. Frayling and a Miss A.M. Frayling. Working for them, Frank's love of horses and horse racing grew. Fraylings were rich enough to have multiple horses, race them, and have jockeys. So Frank would watch, he would learn, and even do a few amateur races himself. That's where the dream enters the picture. Seeing beautiful beasts run around, being ridden by fellow countrymen, had to inspire him greatly. And from there, he knew he wanted to be a jockey. And, as luck would have it, he would have the body for it. For those who don't know, jockeys have no required size for racing, but it is traditional, or just plain a necessity to win, to be small in stature and small in weight. Even in modern era, jockeys tend to be under 5'4" and weigh about 125-ish pounds. In racing, every pound, inch, and edge you can get can mean the difference between winning and losing. And Frank, being small in both weight and height, I imagine malnutrition probably had a large factor in that, gave him the body he needed to become a jockey. But his background of being poor and simply being a stable hand would pretty much snuff out all opportunities he's ever had. That would be until an opportunity arose a few years later while working for the Fraylings in 1923. You see, like I said, the Fraylings raced horses, and occasionally they would get new horses, or simply want to see one of their current horses race. And one day, seems like almost on a whim, Miss Frayling wanted to see a particular horse race. A horse that had yet to run the track, and she decided, basically on the deadline of entering horses, that this horse will race. The horse's name would be Sweet Kiss. Now, when you enter a horse on a whim at the deadline, finding a jockey to ride said horse is kind of hard to do. Little to no notice and a limited market of riders makes it nigh impossible. This is where Frank saw his opportunity. The fates had given him a chance. Little did Frank know, everything has a price. With Miss Frayling not being able to find any other jockeys, Frank pleaded and asked, pretty convincingly, to be the jockey for her. Miss Frayling was extremely hesitant, but beggars can't be choosers. Frank had never had any professional racing underneath his belt, and the few amateur racings he did were few in number. But nonetheless, seeing no other options, she agreed. She would let Frank Hayes ride Sweet Kiss. Frank was over the moon. Naturally, the news that a first-time rider was riding a first-time racing horse reached the betting tables and bookies. They decided to put the odds against him, ranging everywhere from 5 to 1 against, all the way up to 20 to 1 against. Pretty big odds to overcome. The reason why the odds were so stacked against him? Yes, he was a rookie. Yes, his horse was a rookie. Those were probably the main factors, but there was another factor, a third factor. A horse by the name of Gimme. Gimme was the favorite, and many would consider a shoo-in to win. Frank knew the odds were stacked against him, but he understood the horse racing world and decided to take it upon himself to do a little weight cutting, to lower his weight to help give him and Sweet Kiss better odds. In a little over a day, Frank would drop from 142 pounds, his normal weight, to 130 pounds. And for those who don't know, weight cutting is dangerous. If done wrong and quickly, can kill you. Frank, so excited about racing, was willing to risk it, pay the cost of his body to help him win in any way possible. Then, on June 4th, 1923, the race day would arrive. The race would take place at Belmont Park Racetrack located in Elmont, New York. And I think it's important to note the race he and Sweet Kiss would be racing wouldn't be a straightaway. Wouldn't be a simple track race like the Kentucky Derby, which I imagine many of you are envisioning. The race they would be racing would be a steeplechase horse race. What's a steeplechase race, you may ask? This is a race around a track where the competitors must jump and hurdle obstacles like fences and water. And the race ranges anywhere from 4 to 6 miles. Around and round they go, jumping and pushing themselves as hard as they can to win the race. So a very strenuous type of race, to say the least. It's both a sprint and a marathon all at the same time. Nonetheless, the day had come. Frank had starved himself to cut weight the day before, neglecting to drink water even on the race day to save those few ounces of weight. All the competitors now on the starting line. All the jockeys nervous. All the horses raring to go. Mere seconds passing, which must have felt like a lifetime to Frank, as he patiently waited for the start of the chaos. The betting shops closed, the crowd watching in anticipation, the sights, the sounds, the smell, the taste of the air, all paused in the milliseconds before the starting bell. Then, bang, the chaos was unleashed. Horses stampeding forward, the crowd in a cheer, the jockeys holding onto the reins for dear life. The race had begun. Frank and Sweet Kiss, by everyone's surprise, took an early lead. But do not forget, this is a race 4 to 6 miles long, with hurdles in it. The crowd watched with awe as all the riders and the horses pushed themselves to the limit, galloping full blast as the race went on. As time passed, Frank and Sweet Kiss, they were still in the lead. And I can't imagine his emotions at that moment. Racing in your first professional race, seeing no one in front of you, knowing that they're all behind you, that feeling had to be undescribable. There was even a camera set up that got a photo of Sweet Kiss and Frank mid-jump over one of the hurdles. But as the race carried on, the price for this race would be a high one on Frank. You see, the heavy weight cutting, being dehydrated, strenuous activity, and probably being the most excited he's ever been in his entire life puts a lot of strain on one's body. And there's only so much a person's body can handle. During the last 100-yard final stretch of the race, Gimme, the favorite in the race, started to catch up. Frank all of a sudden slumped forward, almost like he was whispering into his horse's ear. Sweet Kiss still pushing and galloping towards the finish line. 50 yards. 40 yards. Gimme hot on their trail. 30 yards. 20 yards. Everyone's holding their breath. Sweet Kiss crosses the finish line. They had done it. A rookie rider and a rookie horse had won the race. Members and workers rushed out to help the horses and jockeys, where Frank, still slumped over, would fall off the horse onto the sand below. A Dr. John Voorhees would rush to him, only to find that Frank was dead. Somewhere on the track, not sure when during the race, Frank, at the age of 22, would suffer a heart attack. He had pushed his body too far past the edge. As where and when he died on the track is speculation. Some say it was during the last 100 yards when they saw him slump. Some say it was earlier in the race, and a hurdle is what made him slump over. Either way, by some twisted miracle, Frank, during the entire race, was able to stay in the saddle and stay in the race. The organization and fellow jockeys paid homage to their fallen rider and gave Frank and Sweet Kiss the entire race day. A few days later, Frank would be buried in his jockey uniform. Quickly, the newspapers got wind of the story and went crazy with it, making things up, running with any information they got. Some newspapers had such bad information, they said Frank was 35 years old, more than a decade off. As for Sweet Kiss, a fast horse, hell, won a race with a dead man on its back. Well, the Frailings would try to find other riders. But due to Frank's death and superstition, no other jockey wanted to ride Sweet Kiss, and even donned a new name for the horse. Sweet Kiss of Death. The first race for Frank Hayes and for Sweet Kiss would be their only and their last. As for the history books, so far, Frank Hayes is the only person to win a race despite being dead. Which, that's one hell of a statement. And I also have to imagine it will be a record that stands for a very, very long time. And in case any of you are curious, Frank and Sweet Kiss, winning the race, won around $1,700 in 1923, which is ballpark around $30,000 today. I am curious, though. This man who came from little, who developed a dream, and seized the opportunity when it arose. I would love to know his feeling during the race. The feeling of bliss and joy he must have felt before his passing. And I would also be curious if he were able to talk. Was the pain, the suffering, and the cost of his life worth it? Was having a few moments being the brightest star in his own universe worth the ultimate price? I also want to say bravo to Sweet Kiss. That horse is one of a kind who does not get enough credit. So here's to Frank Hayes, and here's to Sweet Kiss. Rookies who were bold enough to seize light from the sun itself and do the impossible. Thank you all for listening.